When the stained glass window shattered into a storm of knives, I pressed my palm into the chest of a bleeding boy and realized the insignia on his coat wasn't ours. So, in a blizzard of orders and oaths, I had seconds to decide whether to save the enemy or let him die. And I still hear the sound my heart made when I chose. But there was something I didn't know yet. I was Captain Miles Harrow then, a field surgeon with the 101st Airborne, kneeling on the warped planks of a Belgian church that smelled of wet wool, candle smoke, and the copper breath of blood. It was December 1944, the Ardennes swallowed by the kind of cold that makes wood crack like gunfire. The pews groaned with our wounded, faces chalk white, coats dark with melt and red, and the choir loft wept snow through a broken oculus. The boy on my makeshift table wore German field gray that looked too big for his shoulders. He couldn't have been 17. He whispered, "Mutti," like a prayer, and then a lullaby rose from his throat. Something small and human in a room full of wreckage. I felt for the wound. Shrapnel near the heart, a flutter under my fingers, blood with the stubborn rhythm of someone not ready to quit. Behind me, Corporal Riley hissed, "Sir, he's a Kraut." 2 more men waited. One of ours coughed pink foam. The other clutched a leg like it belonged to someone else. Triage was supposed to be simple in theory and impossible in practice. The chaplain clutched his cross as if it might keep the roof up. I leaned closer. The boy's eyes found mine, and inside them was a question that didn't care about uniforms. I took the scalpel. "Suction," I said. Riley swore, and somebody muttered, "What in God's name?" It felt like the church had inhaled and was waiting to see if I deserved to breathe out. But above us, hidden in rafters and old dust, a different truth was getting ready to fall. The door blew open and Winter staggered in on 3 men, 2 German infantry in white smocks, and between them an older figure with a Red Cross armband and hair gone silver the way worry salts a man. He lifted his empty hands. "Sanitator," he said, not a threat, a request for a truce in the oldest language soldiers share. Behind them, forth through the door, came a silhouette that stiffened the air. Black collar tabs, a mouth set like a verdict. The kind of officer who makes rooms colder by standing in them. The medic looked at me with eyes that knew operating lamps and if I fail math. "Doctor," he said in careful English. "Truce." The chaplain stepped forward with his cross high, as if he could bless the idea into living. The SS officer scanned our wounded and then stopped dead at my table. "Das ist mein Bruder," he said, and the crack in his voice was a small earthquake. "You will save him." It wasn't a plea. It was a command from a man used to getting what he ordered. But the strangest part hadn't even loosened its knot yet. We stacked rifles near the door, butt down like graves for friends we meant to see again. Riley didn't like it. His jaw worked on iron, but he obeyed the chaplain's eyes. The 2 German infantrymen did the same, slow, wary. The SS officer, an Obersturmführer by his cuff title, kept his weapon slung and stepped close enough to smell the iodine. "If he dies," he told me in clipped English, "you die." The medic did something small and enormous. He put his hand on the officer's wrist, fatherly, steady. "Last in Dr. Arbeiten," he said. "Let the doctor work." He took the suction without waiting to be asked. His name was Dr. Otto Weiss, and his hands moved like they had more practice delivering life than fighting death. Back from before the war taught all hands new tricks. I found the fragment, teased it free, and watched the boy's chest rise easier, as if a tree branch had finally shaken loose of ice. "He needs blood," I said. "A lot. We had 2 units left." Riley's voice was raw. "Mulligan's had one. He'll make it with another." Mulligan's freckles looked wrong on a man fighting to breathe. I looked at Otto. He was already rolling up his sleeve. "He's my type," he said, and the way he said it packed a debt and a promise into 4 words. I tied off his arm, set the needle, and whispered a prayer no seminary offers, while the SS officer watched with a hunger I couldn't name. We were performing the most human act in the most inhuman season. But outside, in the white hush, a boot was erasing the last safe line we'd drawn. Between breaths, the church ticked and whispered. Candlelight found a little wooden badge pinned inside the boy's coat. A rabbit, soot-smudged, initials carved crooked. H.W. Otto saw my eyes catch it. "Hans," he said, not looking away from his brother's face. "Mother carved that when he refused to kill a rabbit at Easter. Before the war." He told me this like we were at a train station, not hell. I said, "You learned your English where?" He glanced up, managed a wry half-smile that belonged to another life. "Boston General. Research on rheumatic fever, the war." Interrupted. His eyes flicked to the SS officer and back, jaw setting around a pebble of something unsaid. The chaplain watched the two of them like he could see wires strung between their ribs. I wanted to interrogate the wire, but farther down the nave a man cried out, and Riley slogged off toward the sound, boots squelching through melt and brass. I stitched the heart wall and told myself the boy might live to hear the rest of his lullaby. "He'll need warmth and stillness," I said, which was like telling winter to be kinder. No movement. I didn't say that wars have hands long enough to find any bed. The radio on a pew near the door crackled alive then, and a voice that believed in coordinates more than God made the floor shiver. "Forward elements, report." Static spat. A metallic bark overrode it. "Fire mission on the church coordinates. Repeat, the church." Then came numbers that left frost in my marrow. Someone had painted this place with a target. "No," the chaplain breathed, as if refusal could interrupt physics. Every face turned to the SS officer. He was already angling toward the door, rifle lifting, mouth a hard line. He snapped an order. One of the German infantrymen shook his head, tiny defiance that might cost him everything. "The truce ends when we walk out," the officer said. He jerked his chin at Hans. "Carry him." To me. "You will come." I held my ground because I was already standing at the edge of whatever I'd become. Move him now, and he dies. The officer's eyes slid to Mulligan and back. "Then choose again." The church seemed to shrink. I said to Riley, "Mortars, how long?" He listened to the radio's ugly song. He didn't answer, because the first round came close enough to lift the floor under our knees, and every fragile thing we were holding rattled like crockery. And that was when the real story laced its boots and ran straight at us through the snow. Otto moved first. Not the SS officer, not me, not Riley. Otto stepped between his brother and the muzzle and said in a voice Latin would have recognized, "Stand down, Andreas." The name fell into the room and turned it. The SS man's knuckles went white. "Do not call me that," he snapped, and for one heartbeat he was a boy under a blanket again. The German infantry glanced at each other. The chaplain made a hinge noise with his throat. I understood too much in a blink. This wasn't just a war. It was a family caught inside it like a charm in ice. "He's my brother," the officer insisted, but the sentence had shifted, as if he meant mine to save or mine to lose. "He's our mother's son," Otto answered, exhausted and unafraid, "and you will let him live like a man, not a slogan." I wish I could tell you the officer scoffed and ended the argument. He didn't. His eyes went far away, then came back holding something breakable. Outside, another round fell farther off. Miscalculation or providence or both. A path opened the way a stuck door sometimes slides when it matters. "Help me," I said to no one and everyone, and we moved. Mulligan took the second unit. Hands got blankets and a cot shoved between two stoves. The chaplain opened his last tin of coffee like a chalice. The SS officer didn't lower his gun, but he didn't raise it either. The silence in the church got heavy the way certain truths do, and under all of it hummed a wire I hadn't noticed, hot with a secret that would make the floor live. The basin by the sacristy held a skin of ice. I broke it with my knuckles and scrubbed until the sting felt like penance. In the bowl's warbled mirror, I caught a glimpse of Otto's wrist under the armband. A faded, almost erased tattoo Americans had learned by leaflet to fear, an SS blood group mark, ghosted into his skin. The back of my neck prickled. I turned. He was already watching me watch him. He didn't tug his sleeve down or lie. He just let the weight of my seeing sit on his face. "Once," he said, quiet as snow, "I made a mistake and spent years trying to unmake it." He lifted his hands as if the ink weighed ounces. Boston did not want me back. Berlin did not want who I became. This, He nodded at our broken parliament of hurt men. Is all that still makes sense. He was offering me a truth and asking if I had a place to set it down that wouldn't rot everything it touched. I said the only thing that wouldn't be false. Are you going to help me save them, all of them? His eyes brightened with something like grief. Yes. He reached for fresh gauze. The mirror returned me a man with lines the winter had pinched into permanence. I was about to answer when the nave doors boomed and a scream came in with the wind. She was 12, maybe, hair pasted with ice, blue dress torn, a white scarf frozen into armor around her shoulders. She staggered to the steps and held out both hands. In one, a small pistol that shook like a leaf. In the other, a locket. He has the radio, she said, pointing at the SS officer. He calls the shells. Her French-accented English grated on my heart. Every head snapped like a flock. The officer's jaw went to stone. Riley's hand slid toward a garand. The chaplain whispered, "Child?" She lifted the locket like proof. "My brother is dead," she said, voice flat and old. Oddly, she looked at Otto when she spoke, not at me. Otto went very still. The air cracked. She flipped the locket. The engraving inside rhymed with the rabbit badge on Hans's collar in a way that made my stomach fall. O.W. She tried the name carefully. Otto Weiss. You delivered me in Namur. You saved me. Then the men with black collars took my father away. The church tilted. The officer's smile was a cut. He remembers. He told the girl without taking his eyes off Otto. Then to Otto, so do I. The pistol sagged under its own weight in the girl's thin wrist. She swayed. "Let me see your side," I said, stepping in. A ragged tear, dirty, unkind. Her eyes found mine. "Are you a good man?" I have never hated a question more. Something creaked in the rafters like a gallows breath. "I'm trying," I said, which is the ugliest honest answer I know. She nodded as if she'd weighed it and accepted the currency. And as dust shook loose with the next shell walking toward us through the sky, "I need one favor from you while you're here with me inside this winter. Tell me where you're watching from. City and country. Drop it in the comments so I can remember how far this night has traveled." The next round landed short. The ceiling split hairline but held. The officer snatched the radio and spat coordinates anyway. Riley lunged. So did I. And one of the Germans. And Otto. We collided in a heap. The radio skittered toward the pulpit. The girl fired, the sound small and enormous. The bullet shattered the wooden rabbit badge on Hans's coat instead of the heart underneath. Hans woke into pain and confusion and reached blindly for light. The SS officer came up first and swinging, rifle seeking the girl. Otto stepped between barrel and child and took a bullet through the shoulder that might have killed a smaller man. He went down against the altar rail, making a sound I can still hear in quiet rooms. My hands found his wound, heat gushing. He kept talking through the red fog. "Andreas," he told the officer with a voice that nursed an old breakfast table, "if you were ever my brother, stop." The officer's face quivered like water settling after a stone. "I stopped being your brother when you took their oath," he hissed, and the bitter truth was that the oath had collected interest from them both. I pressed harder. The girl knelt, locket open in her palm. The photo inside showed a woman with Otto's eyes. Our stories had been braided long before we knew we were tied. "Please," she whispered, "not to me." The officer's rifle trembled, then steadied. Hands, broken, mended, awake, reached for the officer's sleeve and said a word so small it felt like God had borrowed it. "Andreas. Home." Sometimes a single word swings a gate, but the door chose that moment to explode open again as our own squad hammered in with breath like smoke and eyes full of steel. "Drop it!" Sergeant Lyle shouted, shotgun welded to his shoulder. A choir of American muzzles rose like a new roof. The two German infantry put their hands up. The SS officer didn't. He lifted his rifle higher, the last proud, stupid, brave line in a bad play. Riley took a step. The room drew a single long breath. "Wait!" I yelled because sometimes mercy is leverage. "He's calling the fire. If he dies, someone else will take the coordinates, and we still die. Make him call it off." The officer blinked, surprised by the idea of saving his own life for ours. Pragmatism is a language even wolves speak. He brought the radio up. "Abort," he said, his voice rebarred in iron. The line hissed a challenge. He repeated himself and added a sentence that cost him something he would never get back. "By my authority." The shelling faltered, then slid away like weather losing its nerve. The walls exhaled. He looked at me over the rim of a world that had cracked. "Now," he said, "we take Hans." Lyle cut me a look. "The kind that stabs but lets you answer before you bleed." "If they move him now, he dies," I said. "If they stay, we're all dead when somebody notices the shells went quiet." The chaplain put his hand on the altar. "There is a third way," he said, voice sudden steady, and then proposed the wildest plan of that winter. Not to Washington, not to Berlin, but to the small senate of men who still felt their own hands. "Baptism," the chaplain said. "Not for souls, for names." He pointed at the girl. "Child, your name?" "Lucy," she said. He pointed at Hans. "Tonight he is Luke's cousin, a villager, no uniform. He stays. In the morning, the village carries him out with blankets." He looked at the officer. "And you're not a soldier tonight." The officer's laugh cracked once. "I am nothing else." The chaplain's eyes were a stubborn kindness. "Tonight you are only a brother." Otto watched them from the floor, his blood making a map I didn't want to read. "For our mother," he whispered. The officer lowered the rifle, an inch, then more. "If I leave him," he said, "you will kill him." Lyle looked at me. I shook my head. "I will keep him alive." The officer searched my face for the punchline, found none. He looked at Hans, at Otto, at Lucy, the smallest flint in the room. Then he unclipped his black tabs, folded them like pressed leaves, and set them on the altar. "For our mother," he said, and this time when his voice cracked he didn't fix it. But he wasn't done with his last trick. He stepped to Hans, fast, pressed his forehead to his brother's for a single stolen second, and backed away. He handed me the radio. "You will hear the last of me on this," he said in a tone men save for graves and vows. He turned to Otto. "I should kill you." "You should," Otto agreed and somehow made it sound like forgiveness. "But you won't." The officer nodded once, a soldier's period. He shouldered his rifle and walked into the snow alone. The two German infantry looked at each other, then at the altar, then chose to stay. Wars tilt on small hinges. Lyle blew out a breath. Riley rubbed his face and cursed a prayer. Lucy slumped against the pew. I kept Otto from bleeding all his trying onto the floor. And if you think the night had finished spending its coins, you haven't counted regret. We worked until the first ignorant light rimmed the broken windows. I gave Mulligan the last morphine and told him about Chicago streetcars as if they were talismans. I warmed Hans's hands on a stove and watched life argue its case. I stitched Otto while he talked about Boston like a lover he had wronged. Lucy slept bent into a comma. Sometimes pausing is safer than stopping. The chaplain murmured to God and to anyone polite enough to listen. Lyle rationed chocolate like a miser with a generous heart. Gunfire somewhere at sunrise barked and died. The radio popped once, then went silent. I knew whose last message it had carried. Hans coughed. Otto woke and checked for his brother without moving his neck. He saw the empty space and did not ask. I still don't know whether that was mercy or cruelty. "He called the fire off," I told him. "It saved us." Otto closed his eyes like tightening a bandage. "He was never just one thing," he said. "None of us are." If you'd asked me then if I believed in redemption, I would have said I believed in stitches. Temporary, hopeful, pulling flesh toward flesh until maybe it remembers how to be one. But the village bell rang. Thin silver over snow, and our fragile scaffold had to look like ritual instead of triage. They came with sleds and blankets, faces carved by winter. We wrapped the dead and the nearly not and the stubbornly alive. We hid Hans's coat under a peasant jacket. The chaplain cut altar linens into a flag of mercy. Snow hushed us like a conspiracy. I walked beside Hans's sled with one hand on his shoulder, an American doctor escorting a German boy, a child with a locket and a pistol too small, a chaplain who had baptized names, and a medic with a faded tattoo who had bled for an enemy because he was out of other ways to say sorry. At the line, a lieutenant scanned us and my face, then opened a gate I hadn't known he controlled. Behind us, the church sat like a ship in pack ice, the wind singing through its broken eye. If you pressed your ear to the stone, you might have heard the ghosts we had tidied for sleep. But our book had one more page. Weeks later, after the bulge faded from a wound to a bruise, a letter found me in a tent that smelled of iodine and wet canvas. Namur postmark. Inside, a photograph. Lucy next to a woman with Otto's eyes and a boy with Hans's stare. The boy wore a wooden rabbit mended by glue, the crack a healed scar. On the back, careful English. He did not die. If you are ever lost about what is good, come for soup. Smaller below. Otto is with us. He walks slower. He laughs when he can. I held the picture until my hands stopped being winter. Then I set it by my cot and told Riley I would sleep 10 minutes. I slept 6 hours and dreamed of snow that forgave ladders. When I woke, a rumor wandered the tents. War's end. I didn't know what a man like me was good for after that. Sometimes I still don't. But when nights go bad, I take the picture out and look at the crooked rabbit and tell myself that if a boy with a mended heart can wear a broken charm and call it luck, we can carry our cracks like talismans instead of curses. And if you wonder what became of the officer, I will only say this. Somewhere a grave lacks his name. A river carries away the story of a man who called off fire on a church he could have burned. And sometimes that's the only line you get to write before the book closes. It would be cleaner to stop there, but life ignores elegant endings. A month after the armistice, a parcel arrived wrapped in brown paper that felt obscene after steel. Inside, a small polished tin. Inside that, black collar tabs, folded like pressed flowers, and a note in a formal hand. For the altar. No signature, no sermon. I took them to a hospital chapel where I had returned to ordinary miracles. Babies, drunks, stitches, and laid them beneath a candle. Wax made a lake of remembered light. The Belgian chaplain had sent a line weeks earlier with no return. We are not saved by being right. We are saved by what we do next. It is the only theology I practice. On thunder nights, I still hear the radio spit the church's coordinates and count seconds like old superstitions. And sometimes I hear a boy say, "Home." So softly, the air leans in to listen. The last time I saw Lucy, tulips were indecent after so much white. She found me near the river with a basket of bread and scolded me for looking thin. She pressed the rabbit charm into my hand like a coin for passage. "He's outgrown it," she said. "Men never outgrow their lucky things," I lied. She asked if men were mostly good. "We can be," I said. "We have to choose it like we choose to stitch wounds we didn't make." She nodded, like she had already decided to be brave on my behalf, too. We said goodbye in that way that is both the right word and the wrong one. I still keep the rabbit in my coat. On bad days, I press it into my palm until my skin remembers that bruises can be instructions. On good days, I forget it until the movies, and then I grin in the dark like an idiot. It is ugly and perfect, like mercy, like winter wheat where tanks once cut the ground. Like a church that should have burned and didn't because enough men decided not to be the worst versions of themselves for an hour. And if part of you doubts any of this, ask yourself why you're doubting. Because war is too cruel for moments like these, or because you're afraid it isn't. And that means we owe each other more than history requires. If you're hearing this in a quiet room, or on a bus with a window that fogs when you sigh, think of that church where enemies put down rifles and picked up names for a few hours, and ask yourself what you would have done. Then do the nearest kind version the next time choice comes looking like someone else's problem. I won't pretend I became a saint. I'm still a man who paused with the scalpel above the wrong uniform and felt how close the blade was to everything I was taught to be. But I can tell you what I did next. I stitched, and I kept stitching. And years later a boy with a glued rabbit smiled in a picture and I believed him. And there is one last secret I've kept too long. The reason I knew Hans would live. When he woke in that bleached dawn, eyes like bottle glass finding a world that hadn't earned him yet. He touched the mended charm at his throat and smiled the smallest private smile, as if someone had told him a joke only he understood. That smile is the one line I trust completely because it wasn't mine to write. But there was one more thing he didn't know yet. Because the church, rebuilt, still stands, stone-patched, glass new, pews polished by Sunday coats, and if you visit on a winter morning when the light comes low and brave, you can see where the old oculus was and feel the air move the way it did that night. The sacristy basin still warps faces into strangers and friends. The altar rail holds a stain no sanding will fetch. Somewhere under the floorboards there is a splinter that remembers the weight of a rabbit badge and a bullet's hard breath, and somewhere up in the beams there is dust that once was a miracle. If you go, leave nothing on the altar but a promise about what you will do next. If you cannot go, carry the promise anyway. I keep mine folded in the same pocket as the rabbit, and some days, when traffic is impossible and the shift runs too long and the world feels like a thin sheet of ice over deep water, I take it out and read it like a prescription. Be brave for an hour. Choose mercy once. Tell the truth and hold it gently. And if you made it this far with me, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and which moment surprised you most. I like knowing how far a December night in the Ardennes can travel and what it echoes against in your own life. Before you go, tap like, hit subscribe, and share this with the one friend who would have stood in the doorway with you when the radio called fire on the church. Your support helps me keep telling the story's history almost forgot.